Hello and a very warm welcome to the late-breaking F1 podcast presented by Harry Eade and me, Ben Hocking, reviewing today the Spanish Grand Prix. Shock horror. A win for Red Bull, a win for Max Verstappen as he extends his championship lead to over 2 race wins now, 52 points by my calculations. He leads the championship after he won, and his nearest challenger, of course, his teammate Sergio Perez, unable to get on the podium because, of course, 2 Mercedes found their way there. Lewis Hamilton second and George Russell third. Harry, that real nail-biter there. Couldn't call it until the end, but ultimately Max Verstappen squeaks by, gets another one.
By the skin of his teeth, so I would say. Yeah, it was a tough one for Max. Just was having a bit of a Sunday drive out there. He didn't. The most difficult moment he had was probably into turn 1, and then after that we didn't see him again until lap 66. Sorry, we did see him a couple of times because he decided to make it spicy by not having track limits in his run plan, but apart from that, we didn't see him for the entire race. It was pretty dominant stuff. But hey ho, we move on to the next one.
Sure, things will be a lot different in 2 weeks' time. You can guarantee that. We're going to be obviously talking about the race out front. We'll also be giving our moments of the race a little bit later on. We're going to be talking about Yuki Tsunoda and his 5-second penalty that ultimately saw him outside of the points, even though he finished on track inside the top 10. Mercedes double podium. We'll be seeing if we think that they are the best challengers now to Red Bull after a tough day for Aston Martin. And Charles Leclerc probably didn't enjoy this weekend too much. But we'll start with the race out front because Max Verstappen won the race by over 20 seconds, nearly 25 seconds. Also had the fastest lap. I think he completed the full Grand Slam, didn't he? Led every lap.
Led the whole weekend.
Literally didn't lose anything the entire weekend. In a season full of great wins by the Red Bull team and by Verstappen himself, do you think this was his most dominant, most impressive victory yet?
It's definitely his most dominant, I'd say. His most impressive, I still think last weekend was probably more impressive. But that was very good last weekend in Monaco. This was still equally impressive, but it was one of those ones where we all came into this weekend in the back of our mind thinking he's probably going to win this one. Like, it was just one of those races where you think this is unless something untoward happens, like a reliability issue or there's some rain, which didn't happen in the end, at least in the race. Then this is Verstappen and Red Bulls to lose because that car is suited for that. Completely suited.
Suited for the F1.
Well, for the F1, but just for Spain, like for all the corners we have in Spain now, which are all very, very high speed, or high speed or medium speed, but mainly high speed. It's just where the Red Bull's quite good. So I don't want to say it was never in doubt because you can't always say that, but it was pretty much never in doubt, I don't think, at least in my view, for Verstappen. He was impressive. As I said, he had one challenge at turn 1 from Carlos Sainz, which he fended off pretty brutally, and then went on from there, and then we didn't see him again. So it was an impressive one. I like I said, I don't think it was quite as impressive as Monaco, just because I think there was slightly more car on show here than there was Verstappen, whereas I think Monaco was just mainly all Verstappen. So I'll say that's more impressive, but still pretty good at the F1 again from Max.
There were so many points throughout the entire 3 days where you could just look at it and say, oh, he had such a dominant weekend because of that, and that. I mean, take a few examples. FP1.
Oh no.
FP1, he was miles clear of everyone else. Qualifying, he was at 90%, I think. He had time in hand.
He didn't finish his final lap. It was definitely going to be a 1:11, but he didn't even do it.
It would have been a 1:11, I reckon. Didn't need it. He abandoned his fastest lap in qualifying. That's another sign of how dominant he was. The fact that even in qualifying, to focus on that a little bit more, was it Q2 where he went out on his new tyres at the beginning of the session, then just chucked on an old pair at the end because no danger whatsoever to get into Q3. And then in the race itself, you can look at the gap and say, okay, that in its own right is a pretty big indication of how dominant he was. But even so, usually you see that at the front of the grid, Max Verstappen or Sergio Perez will still need to play their first tyre choice based on the cars around them to make sure that they have a good start and they don't lose the lead. They were willing to risk that today. Verstappen was on the medium tyres, and apart from Logan Sargent, who probably doesn't really count in this conversation, and his teammate Sergio Perez, everyone else is on the softs. I think Leclerc was on the hards, but everyone else is on the soft tyre. They did not fear the fact that someone like Carlos Sainz could get a better start, because even if, and it didn't quite end up this way, even if Sainz had gone into turn one ahead, he nearly did. Almost. Verstappen's passing him in 2 or 3 laps, isn't he? Like, it's not a competition at that point. So when you can get to the point where you don't need to worry about how quickly you can get down to turn one of the longest runs to turn one on the calendar, you're probably in a very dominant spot. Another point where you can just see how dominant this weekend was, if there was any close competition behind, Max Verstappen is probably shut down a little bit more when he tries to go for a fastest lap with no warnings left in terms of cutting corners and going over track limits. He didn't care. You know, he could have done it 4 times. He could have gone over track limits 4 times, and it'd have still taken a 3-second win.
Just not on turn 2, and he'd been fine. Still
exactly. I mean, yes, he could have picked up a 5-second penalty. It doesn't matter too much when you're winning by 23. Like, yeah, there were just so many moments throughout the entire weekend. He was complaining about overheating on one of his stints. Didn't matter. Did not matter in the slightest. This was, to your point, Harry, I don't know whether you can call it the most impressive. You can definitely call it the most dominant weekend of the season so far for Verstappen, which is saying a lot given how good he's been to this point. I always like to think with these front runners, the better your weekend is, the less we see of you. We didn't see Verstappen for long stretches of that race, and it's not because he was bad. It was because he was good. It's because he's so far out in front that there's not really too much to see. We had it so much with the Mercedes a few years ago, where they just didn't get any coverage because they were so far ahead of everyone else, and the battling was going on behind them. This was a great weekend. Most dominant for sure. Most impressive, hard to say. The one main takeaway I had from this Grand Prix, and I'll pose the question to you as well, Harry, is that if there was some sort of rule where for every 1 second you are ahead of second place, you get an extra bonus point in the championship standings. Let's say that rule exists. I think Verstappen wins that by 50 seconds. Max Verstappen might have won that race by a minute. I don't think there was any point in that Grand Prix, apart from his fastest lap attempts, where he's going at more than 80%. I think he could have doubled his advantage if he needed to. He just didn't need to. Yeah,
I agree. Sorry for the bike there.
The didgeridoo.
The didgeridoo's back. I agree. He's just, when a driver is completely comfortable in their race car, it's just there by their team radios and the confidence on there. And when GP, his engineer, is basically telling him off about track limits, he's like, yeah, but I'm going to do a fastest lap. And then he does the fastest lap, and then GP's like, Max, please, stop.
I love the sass. I love GP's sass.
And Max is like, yeah, whatever. See, I told you. Yeah, whatever.
There are times where you win by 20 seconds or 25 seconds, and that's everything you've got in the car. I don't think that was close to everything they had in the car.
No, I agree. And also, look, that car, as I said, is completely suited to Barcelona. But a lot of what Max did today was still Max Verstappen, because look where his teammate was. I know that was a qualifying thing, but if the car is that dominant, Perez should be second. Even starting, where did he start? 12th?
11th. Was it him 11th and Russell 12th? I can't remember which way around they started.
It was with Russell, wasn't he? Anyway, so he should have. If the car is such a massive factor in this, then Perez should be second. So I think it proves the point that it is still a lot of it is down to Max.
I mean, you look at Saudi Arabia from this season. Verstappen starts, what was it, 3 or 4 positions lower than Perez started this Grand Prix, and he gets back to second.
Yeah.
Perez here, I know he didn't necessarily have any safety cars or virtual safety cars to help him along the way, but he doesn't get back to P2. So, yeah, you're right. It is car plus driver. It's always car plus driver. And people always try and argue it's only car or it's only driver. Every dominant spell in the history of F1 is the same. It is a combination of both. And they're just working so well together. It's to Martin Brundle's point towards the end of the race, or even after the race, I can't remember exactly when he said it. It's just you have to admire the dominance. You have to admire the greatness to an extent. We might not be getting these races for the win like we want to see every weekend, but in the absence of that, you've got to appreciate the greatness that we're witnessing.
And also, from P2 down, mega spicy. Don't worry about P1. P2 onwards is all good.
Yeah, exactly. Focus on that a little bit more. To your point about Sergio Perez, what did you make of his comeback? Because we know Q2 didn't go his way, but he did manage to make up 7 positions in the Grand Prix. Was it enough? What do you think?
It was fine. Yeah, I think he should have finished in front of both Mercs. I know they're at least Russell. Because did he start in front of Russell? I can't remember what all of those two were.
I think he did.
Yeah.
Obviously, Russell had a much better start because, turn 1, he clearly doesn't share my opinion of turn 1 and doesn't fancy doing it. So I think by the end of lap 1, there were maybe 4 positions or so between them. But they started alongside each other.
But I still think he should be beating Russell there and, potentially being in P2. It was fine. It was an all right comeback, but it's, less so than it was in Monaco. But he's ruining his weekends with qualifying. It's the same in Australia, same in Monaco. And he's done it again here in Spain. So he's never going to be able to challenge Verstappen on a consistent basis because Max doesn't make those sort of mistakes. As we said, he was fastest all weekend. And then Perez, even if Perez had been second, he probably still wouldn't have won. But it doesn't matter. You want to be second on the days that you can't win it, and Perez isn't doing that. So yeah, it was a fine comeback. But I agree. I know, as you say, there were no safety cars or anything like that to help him out along the way. But it was. I still think he should have been P2, P3 at least.
I certainly think P3. Lewis Hamilton had good pace all day, so that would have been another step. But I do think that Russell was gettable, and that's the sort of 3 points that he won't be able to get back. And if we say that the championship lead is now over 2 races worth, Verstappen could effectively retire from the next 2 Grand Prix. He will still hold the championship lead regardless of what happens in either of those 2 races. He's already built a very good buffer. And now we're looking at Sergio Perez. We've been asking the same question pretty much all year when it pertains to a Perez championship battle or how close can Perez get to Verstappen. The question's always been, okay, yes, he can do it at Saudi Arabia. He can get the pole and the win there. Yes, he can do it on... he can do it at Baku, he can do it at Monaco, he can do it on these street circuits, but can he do it in the bulk of the European season when it is pretty much all specific racetracks, racing circuits? That was his issue last year, and this is really the first evidence we've got of a standard European track that we're now getting into a large stretch of. And the first test, he's failed quite dramatically. The only way Perez can get close to Verstappen is if he can get closer to him at these sorts of Grand Prix. We've got Silverstone, we've got Austria, we've got Spa and Monza and Zandvoort. All of these races are to come. If Verstappen holds even half of the advantage that he had here at Spain, Perez isn't going to get close to him. So the pressure is, I think the pressure really is on for the next race, I'd say. If we're going to, it's Austria next, isn't it? If I've got
Canada?
Oh no, Canada. Sorry, we've got Canada, then Austria. So I guess, sorry. It makes complete sense that we're going to North America.
Obviously, we're going to North America again.
But yeah, I think the next couple of races, Perez has got to assert some sort of dominance.
Good luck.
Good luck, sir. Hey, Harry.
Oh, here we go.
Do you want to review some bold predictions?
Oh, yes, I do. Hang on. Yeah, we do. What a day to be alive.
Oh man.
Come on.
I love reviewing bold predictions. It's my favourite part of the show.
What a shame Sam isn't here. He'd love to do this.
I'm sorry, Sam. So Sam, his
call
bold
him?
prediction wasn't right on this occasion. Unlucky, Sam. He said that a Red Bull wouldn't win the race. So, of course, they went and had the most dominant run in the history of F1, I think. So, well done. Fortunately, his prediction for pole position went much better. He went for Charles Leclerc. In terms of our bold prediction, and I say our because normally we would have unique bold predictions, but of course we, per chance, managed to land on the exact same bold prediction and pole 1, 2, 3.
Can I just say as well, for people that have said that I've copied Ben. Me and Ben I wasn't even here. I did mine stood in Heathrow Airport. I was not here to know what Ben's was, so I don't know how this happened, but we ended up with exactly the same.
And it's a good thing we did.
Oy!
Because we predicted that Verstappen would be on pole. Harry, was Verstappen on pole?
He was.
And then we predicted that Verstappen would be first, Lewis Hamilton would be second, and George Russell would be third. I think we predicted that.
Yep.
That happened, didn't it?
That did happen.
Yeah.
Sergio Perez gave it a good go to not make it happen, but it happened.
Yeah, cheers, Checo. And our bold prediction was that both Mercedes would be on the podium. Harry, did you watch the podium after?
I did, yeah.
How many Mercedes did you see on there?
Well, there was one, Lewis Hamilton, and then the other side. Oh, another one. George Russell was there. There's two.
Which means that okay. First of all, I'm quite happy about me getting a bold prediction right. Harry has not only got 2 bold predictions right in a season, he's got 2 in back-to-back races.
2 in a row, baby.
Which means, standings-wise, I am breathing a little easier because I am now on 3 for the season. Harry, by virtue of getting 2 back-to-back, is on 2. Sam's in the danger zone with 1.
I mean, this will not last, obviously. I'll balls this up somewhere later on in the season. But I'll revel in it now. What a day to be alive. I don't think I've ever been not last in the season of bold predictions. I know I will be by the end, but it's just huge.
Amazing. Hey, I mean, there's a good chance it ends 3-2-1. Like, it could.
That's a very, very fair point. We've done 2 weekends on the trot now. We've been pretty good as a trio.
Have.
I know Sounds is a bit off today, but as you said before we start recording, would only take a breakdown for Verstappen, and Sam's in there as well.
It's a good start to the LB year for bold predictions. How about that?
Who saw that coming?
Not me. Not even close. Driver of the day. Who've you got?
Verstappen, an obvious contender, but I think I went for him last week. But it was pretty good, wasn't he, out there? I'll go for Lewis Hamilton. I thought he was on great form today. He was not going to get near Verstappen, but I think he got as close as he could do. And I know Russell was coming back from 12th, so I guess in that sense the gap makes sense. But he was comfortably ahead of Russell. There was nothing. They seemed to be at the same sort of gap all race, basically. So yeah, Lewis Hamilton for me. I thought Russell was actually really good as well, considering how far he was down the grid to come back to third. But yeah, I'll land for Hamilton. Oh, another shout out. Sorry, Zhou Guanyu.
What a saint!
What a little star he was today. I probably should have gone for him, but I'll big him up now. Zhou Guanyu had a great race out there.
Yeah, he did. Zhou Guanyu definitely deserves credit for what he was able to do. I know from qualifying, Bottas was shocked that Zhou had the pace to make Q2, but then it turns out that Alfa Romeo had more hiding away in terms of race pace compared to qualifying pace, because Zhou had to make his way from, was it P13 that he qualified in? So, he made progress during the Grand Prix, as did Yuki Tsunoda, and we'll discuss their incident a little bit later on. Realistically, I was going to land on the 2 names that you mentioned, Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. I will go with Max Verstappen. I've given it to him a lot this year, but but he keeps being really good.
Yeah, it's quite annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll give it to Verstappen. He won the race by quite a margin.
That he did. That he did.
Worst driver of the day. What have you got?
I just realised we've not done the never mind, haven't done the jingle. Should I do the worst one?
We're so bad at this. Yeah, go on then.
What number is that? Sound 4.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
Who have you got?
Valtteri Bottas. What are you doing, son? Where were you today?
Oof.
I mean, wasn't great overall, but when Joe Guan Yu, your younger teammate, is up in P9, having a great race, as we've already said, you can't do that. And you mentioned that you were shocked about his that his show got into Q2. I think he should be shocked at how slow he's been. What are you doing, Valtteri?
It's becoming a bit concerning.
A little bit of a worry.
It keeps happening. Like once every 2 or 3 races, Bottas will just be nowhere.
Yeah.
And I know Zhou's not always in the points, but I don't think Zhou has these disastrous weekends in the same way that Bottas does.
Well, it's a little bit... I'm a bit worried he's having his Kimi Räikkönen phase out. It's a phase out of F1. Doesn't care anymore. Anyway, we'll see. But today, it was no good.
Yeah, I would put him as a contender for sure. Kevin Magnussen. I know we're not looking at the weekend as a whole, but certainly qualifying wise, it's never great when you're getting knocked out in Q1 and your teammates making it to Q3. In the race, I think the pace was a little bit closer, but even so, Hulkenberg still had a pretty large advantage, even as he was falling down the grid in that first stint. So I think he's a contender, and I'd probably say it's between those two. Lando Norris, I guess you'd have to throw in there as well because he did cause his own downfall. It was a tough racing incident, I will give him that, but I will go with the same as you. I'll go Bottas.
Why were the McLaren so slow in the race? I know Norris had his own incident. They were so slow.
What? Yeah, they really were. I don't think they were quicker. So let's just name the teams they weren't quicker than. So they weren't quicker than Red Bull. No. They weren't quicker than Mercedes.
Nope.
I don't think they were as quick as Alpine. Ferrari. They weren't as quick as Aston Martin. They weren't quicker than the one Ferrari that worked. They weren't quicker than Alfa Tauri.
Alfa Romeo.
They weren't quicker than Alfa Romeo. That lands them P8 at the moment, and only Williams and Haas behind you.
Yeah. Not great.
No.
Great. Weird. I know they said they recognised it was going to be a one-lap wonder, and, fair play for Norris for being that far up the grid, but you'd have thought maybe... I know even with the incident, he might have crawled his way back up further than he ended up. But yeah, anyway.
Okay, Ferrari. Here we go.
Oh no!
I feel like I managed to be quite nice to them in Monaco. They're not going to get the same leeway again here, I'm afraid. So it wasn't a great weekend for Ferrari.
Not ideal.
Carlos Sainz did manage to get on the front row at his home race, which is pretty good. The race wasn't quite as productive as he fell behind the Mercedes and Sergio Perez, but still managed to claim P5 and 10 valuable points. Charles Leclerc had a nightmare of a weekend. Knocked out in Q1 for the first time in 4 years, I think. And I can't quite remember what happened 4 years ago.
Monaco 2019, I think.
But it wasn't pace, was it?
Ferrari builds it up, yeah.
Yeah, so he was outside of the top 15 on pace. They decided to completely change the car overnight, had a pit lane start. It amounted to absolutely nothing as Charles Leclerc still finished. Although he got close, he still finished outside of the point. So it was P11 he settled on after Yuki Tsunoda's penalty. They went for an interesting strategy. What was your thoughts on that and indeed the whole weekend, Harry?
What are you doing?
There it is.
Oh, Ferrari, come on. You were doing... I mean, you weren't doing so well, but in terms of us having a go at you, you'd avoided it quite well, really, for most of this year. But look, I think it's pretty clear there's something potentially wrong with Leclerc's car because he hasn't forgotten how to drive. And I don't think he's suddenly just doesn't have pace anymore to not be up with his own teammates. So I'm sure they obviously couldn't. They changed everything in the car that they could overnight, but they've sent all the bits he had on Saturday back off to Maranello to inspect. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a cracked chassis or something like that. It's often the case, but yeah. So look, I don't believe Leclerc is suddenly forgotten how to be an F1 driver, but at least give him a chance to try and make some. Why have you started? You start him on the hard tyres. Get that choice. You go long into the race here. He's at the back anyway. Just keep going, plodding along. See what happens. Maybe there's a safety car. It might fall your way. Maybe some rain. Lap 17 we got to. Lap 17. They're like, that's enough of that for you, Charles. Have some soft tyres. Because that's going to get you to the end of the race. I mean, fine. If it's not working out, then I get you're trying to try something different. But just why did you bother starting with hards? You gave him the slowest tyre to do 17 laps. It's just like a quarter of the race. I struggle with that one. I'm not entirely sure why. And I don't know how many stops he did in the end, but I think he went hard, soft.
I thought he went hard, soft, hard. But I wasn't... Okay, someone might be able to confirm whether this graphic was wrong. So I thought that he started on the hards, went to the softs, and then went back on the same hard tyre.
Nah.
I don't know whether that happened, but the tyre graphic didn't look right.
I mean, if that's true, what are you doing?
I hope that wasn't actually the case.
There was a bit of chatter about the tyre graphics being wrong, but they were saying about Alonso in the Aston Martin, but I'm pretty sure that they had it right because Alonso went soft, hard. Again,
I think they just got... I think they just thought Lance Stroll's pit stop was Alonso's pit stop.
Yeah. Again, another slightly weird choice to have hard tyres. They did it for like the last 20 laps.
Yeah.
Again, whatevs. Yeah, for Ferrari, I mean, I don't understand that call. I don't understand that call at all. And with Sainz on the other side, what's the Ford Sierra action plan for? What's that about? What does that mean?
I don't know, man. Be patient.
Yeah, and then Sainz saying be patient, and then they tell him to box, and he's like, okay, why? There's just no... And I think I saw another message later on whenever Charles had his second stop and they wanted to put him on hards and he was like, no, I want softs. I don't know what he ended up on in the end. I think it was hards. But it's just, there's no trust between, and we had this when Vettel was there, the same problem where you just didn't trust his strategy team to make the right call and he'd be making suggestions from the pit stop.
Well, but Vettel had the experience to override in certain situations, and it ended up okay for him. I don't think Charles Leclerc's there yet.
No, and Sainz is trying his best, but again, not sure they're being listened to, or they're not pushing hard enough to be listened to by their own team. So, oh man, I mean, today was their race pace today was crap. It was awful. What was?
It was, but it's kind of been that way for I know Azerbaijan was all right, but Saudi Arabia they finished, P7, P8 there, possibly, on pure pace. They were nowhere last week. I mean, it just...
Yeah.
I don't know. It seemed like another weekend pace-wise. You're right, it was awful, but it seems like awful is the norm.
Yeah, but they can qualify it, and that's about it. But that's getting to 2021 standards. Potentially maybe 2020, but yeah, anyway, pace of the car is rubbish. I definitely think there's something wrong with Leclerc's car, but in general, bad. All round bad.
Yeah, bad. That's a good word for it. Let's start with Carlos Sainz. So Carlos Sainz did, in fairness to Carlos Sainz, he could have done that race weekend 500 different ways, and it would not have got any better than how it actually ended up. I think he qualified second, which, let's face it, that was his pole position based on Max Verstappen was not catchable. And In the race itself, as I say, I think they could have gone with 10 different strategies, and I think they all end up with him in 5th place. He wasn't beating Verstappen, obviously. I don't think he ever was going to have the pace to beat the Mercedes or Perez either. The only way, if Perez had been held up a little bit more, maybe that becomes a race. But actually, I think P5 was the optimum. So from Carlos Sainz's side of the garage, I think he can probably walk away from this weekend not happy, but at least content in his own ability that he got everything he could out of the weekend. It was 10 points this weekend, and if he keeps doing that, and let's say another Azerbaijan happens, there might be podiums on the cards if he can keep getting the most out of the car that's available to him. Charles Leclerc, yeah, obviously something was wrong, because throughout practice, it seemed fine. He seemed happy with the car in FP3 on Saturday morning. So I think either something has happened at the very beginning of qualifying or something has happened at the end of FP3, because it just didn't add up. Usually when you have a horrifically bad, unusually bad weekend, it carries on throughout the weekend. Like, it starts in FP1 and it never gets better, or you can identify it quite early. Here, it was still a shock. It was a shock in qualifying when he could not get it together. And in the race, it didn't really improve. Like, it was obviously better than qualifying was, but still, you would expect that he could have got back into the points, and he didn't. I am at the point now where I am actually going to start some sort of fundraising page for people to help me out in terms of numbers of people and resources to get my man out of that team, because they are crushing his career race after race. What does the guy have to do? He is no longer God Leclerc, and it's not because of his obvious godly ability. He is trapped Leclerc, because he is trapped. I know that we've had some rumours recently of Leclerc to Mercedes. I don't know if Charles Leclerc started them himself, but if he didn't, it would have been a good idea. What more does the guy have to do? I think something went wrong with that car this weekend, and maybe it will get better in Canada in 2 weeks' time. But he's heading into his prime years, and he hasn't got a car that is capable of, I'd say, winning championship. He's not got a car that's capable of winning races at the moment. It's sad to see.
Sad Leclerc.
Yeah, maybe that's more accurate. He looked very sad after qualifying. Do you see his interview in the pen afterwards? He didn't look happy.
Didn't look like a happy boy. Happy bunny.
Can't blame him. Well, since we got more time on this segment versus the last segment, should we give out our Big Brain Award?
Yeah, well, I think it's an appropriate one. I'll do the jingle again. Hang on. Please hold.
Bob, we're going to need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
Nice.
Beautiful. What was your big brain moment?
I've already said it. Charles Leclerc been put on soft tyres after running hard tyres for 17 laps. I know we've said it before. This award was made this year for just Ferrari, basically, and others have made it in. But Ferrari are like, no, we want this award every race. So yeah, it was. As I said, I don't understand. I don't know. I get in a race situation, it's tough for the strategy team to sometimes make the calls under pressure. They were under no pressure for this one. There wasn't a lot riding on it. And if we can see from the outside, me and Ben and everyone else watching, and we're idiots, if we can see that that's a bad call, I don't get how they don't see it so easily.
You just look at the top drivers like Mercedes and it would be Mercedes, and they're still going around on soft tyres. And you're like, do you not see the same thing that we see?
Do you not see what you've done here? Yeah, I know.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so anyway, that one for me.
I probably would go for that, but in the interest of variety, I will offer up something else, which is AlphaTauri just trying to talk strategy to Yuki Tsunoda. It just never goes well. He just tells you to shut up every time, and yet they still persist. Do you want this or do you want this? Let me race.
Yeah, don't give Yuki the option. Just tell him what he needs. You coming in now, Yuki?
Drivers are like snowflakes, aren't they? In that they're all unique. I don't mean snowflakes in the sort of 21st century meaning of the term. I mean actual snowflakes. They're all unique. They're all brilliant in their own individual way. You don't talk strategy with Yuki Tsunoda. Might work for other drivers, not Yuki.
Can I just make an honorary mention for this award? But it happened on Saturday. It's the menace of F1, Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso, having witnessed Gasly impede Verstappen into turn 4 or on his flying lap, immediately on the radio, and I guess Aston Martin thought Alpine might be challenging them this weekend, and they were kind of right. I know they ended up in front at the end of Ocon, but immediately he's on the radio going, blatant impeding there, lame to look at that, blah, 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 blah. The man doesn't switch off, ever.
You're right, but there's more to it than that. And it proper riled me in that he said on the spot, 3 places.
Yeah, I know.
And it ended up being 3 places. Fernando Alonso was able to see, whilst driving in a qualifying session, what the penalty should have been. There's no excuse for the stewards to take 2 hours to say the same thing that Alonso said after 2 seconds. Come on.
His brain is too big for his helmet. He's too big for the sport. He needs to be a steward after he finishes.
If he's willing to hand out penalties that quickly, he's got the job in my eyes. Jeez. Well, who would have thought it? 2 Mercedes on the podium. Yeah. we thought that, didn't we? Mercedes double podium. Lewis Hamilton managed to make progress in the early parts of the race, getting to P2 and looking fairly solid there for the rest of the Grand Prix, not really under too much threat. And George Russell, despite starting outside the top 10, decided turn 1 wasn't to his liking, made up about 12 positions on the first lap. And then he was set from there, and he managed to make a few overtakes on track to get to P3. A little bit of pressure from Sergio Perez towards the end of the Grand Prix, but ultimately a few seconds in hand as they crossed the line. What do you think about this one? We know that they had upgrades brought at Monaco, and this might have been the first real trial of them here in Spain. On first inspection, seemed to work?
Yes, they did seem to work. But my worry is that they're baiting us.
They baiting us bad, aren't they?
Because, yes, they worked. And today they were easily second quickest team out there. And it was an impressive race in both of them. I think, as you say, Hamilton was impressive with his P2, but I think Russell's pace to just get through the rest of the fit or the rest of the top 10 to get up to P3, that was impressive. So, yes, I think they've worked so far. My worry is, if you think back to Spain last year, they were quite good at Spain last year as well, which is my only concern here, that maybe this, and I hope not. I hope it is actually genuine. That's genuine pace now. But my worry is that that car works at Spain.
It seems to work at Spain.
Seems to work at Spain. And if you look back at Friday, again, impressive work from them to get to the point where they were both on the podium. But look at Friday; they were nowhere. That their pace on Friday was rubbish. And again, I appreciate they've worked on it and got it to that place, but my worry is, and I don't want to take this away from the hardworking people at Mercedes. My worry is that they just kind of luckily got into a sweet spot, and it's not actually the upgrades. I really hope it is the upgrades, and I'm proved wrong next race in Canada, which is an entirely different track. But that's 90%. I think it is the upgrades have worked. Little 10% of my brain is thinking, yeah, but maybe they just can do Spain, and that's it. So yet to be convinced 100%.
Jury's out.
Yeah, jury's out. But for this race and this race alone, yeah, hell yeah, they worked. Those upgrades definitely worked. If you want to take away any conclusion from this, and they were good, and they beat Aston Martin comfortably out there. So for now, yes, they've worked, but just I think remain calm, everyone. We'll see what happens in the next one, and as I say, I hope it does work.
Yeah, I think probably the most encouraging thing for Mercedes is not the fact that they were the second quickest team. It's how comfortably they were the second quickest team. I'm thinking about this on the spot, so I don't actually know my own answer to my own question here.
Nice.
But classic. I'm trying to think, were they closer to Red Bull in front than they were to Ferrari behind? I don't know. It felt like there was obviously a substantial gap between Red Bull and Mercedes, but it felt like the gap between Mercedes and everyone else was pretty substantial too. I don't know.
It's a fair point, and maybe it's a contributing factor to the fact that Perez couldn't actually get on the podium because they're actually closer to Red Bull. Yes, fair shout.
But to your point, is it a one-track wonder? Because, well, let's have a look at the history books. Oh, wait, no, let's get rid of the history books and just look at last year's season review and we'll see the same thing happened. We made this point on the preview that George Russell was on the podium and obviously Perez had a much better starting position last year. Otherwise, it was kind of the same race. I know Russell was a bit more involved with the race for the lead in the first third of the Grand Prix in 2022 versus this year. But certainly Red Bull and Mercedes being better than everyone else was exactly what we had at Spain last year, which flew in the face of everything we had before that point in the year, but ultimately kind of flew in the face of everything that followed it too. And I hope we're not going to get in the same situation, similar to your brain saying, I don't know if it's going to continue. My brain is doing very much the same thing because, well, we saw it last year. Lewis Hamilton last year, I know he finished P4 or P5, I can't remember exactly where he finished, but he had to make that incredible comeback after first lap contact with Kevin Magnussen. It was a point we made on the preview. Otherwise, he probably would have been in the fight as well. So I don't think the race that we saw last year was vastly different to the race that we had this year. Canada is... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt. Am I making this up? But we had... not pre-season testing, shakedown for the first test in 2022. That was at Spain.
Yes.
And didn't we all leave that test thinking Mercedes had nailed it? Or am I making that up?
Didn't we leave that test thinking McLaren had nailed it?
Oh, maybe. All right, fine.
It might have been Mercedes and McLaren, to be fair.
But anyway, I'd just add to that point, maybe they just couldn't do Spain, that car concept. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, and Canada's going to be an interesting one because Canada is, to your point, vastly different to Spain. Its characteristics are just vastly different from what we had. So, I'd be encouraged, but my encouragement would certainly stop at a certain point, and it wouldn't go any further than that until we see this at 2 races or 3 races, or even maybe a couple more than that. Because in a season that has something like 63 races, I can't remember exactly what we've landed on this year. One race doesn't mean everything.
It's a very valid point, Ben.
What about Aston Martin? So we saw Mercedes overtook Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship today, thanks to the double podium. Both Aston Martins also finished alongside each other, but that was for P6 and P7. Oddly off the ball, weren't they?
They were oddly off the ball, and I feel quite bad for Lance Stroll because I know we've given him a bit of a hard time lately, but he actually had quite a good weekend. But it's a shame because the car's not where it's been all year. Of all the weekends to have a good race, this was not the one potentially. But oddly off the ball. But having said that, we didn't really talk about much in the preview, but I kind of expected them to be. This circuit's just not where that car excels. If you look at all, and it's not really like any of the circuits we've had so far. It's quite good at like the low speed, medium speedy corners, like we've had for most of the.
Kind of don't have any of them at Spain anymore, do we?
None. Not even that last sector is all pretty quick now. So I in the back of my mind I thought maybe this was going to be a tough one. Obviously Alonso was slightly out of position in qualifying, but I think where they ended up was probably where I thought they were going to be. I think Alonso, had he started further up, would have ended up further up the road than Lance. Also, Fernando Alonso just not overtaking someone by choice. What's that about?
That is a long-term play if I ever saw one.
That's a man who wants an extension on his contract.
Yep.
Tell Lance not to panic. Okay, sure. But yeah, so I think Alonso might be further up the road in a normal race for him. But yeah, they just weren't. They weren't that quick here. And I do think it's track specific. I would expect them to be back nearer where they were before this in Canada. I mean, it was a week ago. Alonso was second. I know it's Monaco, but that was a week ago. They've not suddenly forgotten that car can't drive fast anymore. So, yeah, I think it was a off the ball weekend, but I think it was, I guess, not expected, but maybe not unexpected. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Canada will be interesting because whilst Canada does have a few high-speed corners, it's a lot more stop-start versus Spain. Spain flows quite well, particularly now they've got rid of the chicane, to the point where I think I asked this question on the preview. It's like, what's actually the slowest corner at Spain now, outside of the hairpin coming out of the first sector? There aren't that many truly slow corners. But we know Canada has, most of the first couple of corners are all slow, got the hairpin leading onto the main straight, the back straight. So I think Canada might be a bit of a revival for them. But this felt Mercedes-esque in a way, in that they kind of limited the damage. They did what Mercedes often do and Ferrari often don't, which is when you're not having a good weekend, at least get as many points out of it as you can. And they'll walk away with 14 points or so. It could have gone worse than that. So, I don't think they ever had. I think Alonso was probably on the optimum strategy as well. I don't think they could have done much more there. Stroll, I think they left Stroll with too much to do in the final. I think they left Stroll with about 30 laps or so on those hard tyres at the end, which was probably 5 more than you'd ideally want if you're splitting the strategy equally 3 ways. But I think they took what they could out of the weekend. But to your point, just not their race.
Not their race. But yeah, it's a fair point on bringing back as much as they could from it. And I think the trait of that car, which is it looks after its tyres really well, still came into fruition a bit. Because, I mean, at the start of the race, they were sort of sinking like stones through the field a little bit, the pair of them. But they could go longer on that first stint compared to those around them. Like, I'm thinking like Ocon, who else is around them? Tsunoda, yeah, exactly. So that helped them. And as you say, I do think maybe had Alonso started further up, maybe could he have challenged Sainz? Potentially, I don't know. But
yeah, that's the point. I think that probably could have been quite close, actually, yeah.
But as you say, I think it's probably the maximum for them. And I think they'll be further up to where they were in Canada.
So a little bit behind Fernando Alonso was Yuki Tsunoda. Now, Yuki Tsunoda was having a very good race for himself. He started P15, if I remember correctly. So not a great starting position. Both AlphaTauris knocked out in Q2. But Yuki Tsunoda made great progress, particularly early on in the Grand Prix, fighting for points. And then an incident happened with Zhou Guanyu. Zhou goes to turn into turn 1. He's on the outside of the corner. Not a lot of space there. Yuki Tsunoda given a 5-second time penalty for not leaving him enough room. Now, of course, the 5-second time penalty proved pretty detrimental because Yuki Tsunoda finished inside the points, but that 5-second time penalty knocked him down about 3 positions and meant he scored absolutely nothing. So what were your thoughts on the 5-second penalty? We had a lot of moves go into turn 1 today. That was the only one that caused any controversy, though. Do you think it was the right decision?
Not. Oh, I've really got back and forth on this one. Shock. I don't think. I think it's harsh. I don't know because I feel like it was. I think Zhou Guanyu slightly exaggerated his move off track, Which fair. He's playing to the.
He made the most of it, didn't he?
Exactly.
It was one of those where it wasn't a dive, but he let the referee knew that he'd gone over.
Exactly. So I think that's why I've gone back and forth on it. I think it was tight, but I think in my book, I think they probably still could have made it around. But my point being is that there was no contact. I think Zhou, you still would have had to turn out of it slightly. But my point being is that he turned out of it quite dramatically and flew off down the runoff. So I think that's why I'm thinking this is a harsh one. I think it still would have been tight, but I do think they probably both could have got around that corner, which is why I feel it's unfair for Yuki. There was no contact. To get a 5-second penalty for he's not actually pushed him off. A harsh one in my view, but I've seen people comparing it to the Verstappen Sainz one at the start of the race, but Sainz wasn't in the same position that Zhou was, from what I remember. Zhou was slightly further ahead, so there's that. But anyway, dodgy one. I would have left this one alone, if I'm being honest.
I reserve the right to change my opinion because we are recording this very soon after the race is finished. So I might look at a few different angles of this, but at least first impressions here, I didn't think it was a penalty.
Oof, that's a rare one from Ben. You normally gives them out.
Yeah, usually I'm a bit more heavy-handed on the penalties compared to you, I guess. But here, I don't think it was the right decision. I don't think Zhou was far enough into the corner to say that he didn't have the room. It was almost like it was shaping up to the point where he probably wasn't going to have enough, but I don't think he stuck it in there long enough to prove that he didn't. Like, if he had stayed on that same trajectory for an extra half a second, I think Tsunoda would have, if Tsunoda still hadn't left the room, at that point I would have changed my opinion and said, yes, Tsunoda didn't leave the space. You had to go out wide to avoid that. Instead, I don't think that happened. I think one step down from that happened, in that it looked like Tsunoda wasn't going to leave the space. Therefore, Zhou preempted it and decided to use the runoff. So I wouldn't have given a penalty for this. It was close. You're absolutely right. It was close. But I don't think he left it in there long enough to prove his point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's what I was saying. He just, the first sign of danger, he just jumped off the road, which
is fair enough.
Yeah, and I get it. You want to preserve your race, but then I don't know whether you can scream for a penalty.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. Obviously, it worked out in Zhou's favour, so he might well go ahead and do that again. And look, Zhou is fighting for himself and himself only, which all other drivers are. So when he claims that Tsunoda should get a penalty, every other driver would do exactly the same thing. So fair enough. But yeah, I'm on your side on this. I wouldn't have given a penalty for that.
Another P11 for Yuki as well.
Did it end up P11?
I think he might be P11. I might be wrong. Maybe he's P12 actually.
It was 11 or 12, but yeah. Oh god, if points went to P12 rather than P10, it'd be all right, wouldn't he? A quick one before we get on to moment of the race. We'll have one last ad break of this show. What would you rate the race out of 10?
Oof. 6.5 or a 7? 6.5. What would you rate?
Fair enough. Yeah, I was between 6 and 6.5, but I landed on 6.5 as well. So
it was not an all-time classic, but it was interesting till the end, I would say.
I'm going to call 6.5 just about in the good category.
Yeah.
In which case, I'm going to say last 3 Spanish Grand Prix.
Oh, come on.
Hey, you roll your eyes. The boring Spanish Grand Prix has delivered 3 good races in a row.
Also, I've got to say that getting rid of the chicane was... thank the Lord we've done that.
Good Lord. Thank you. I mean, Aston Martin might try and get it put back in.
Yeah, true.
But it was great.
Yeah. It was great to watch in quali, but also just during the race, it just made it so much easier for them to... I would say maybe next year they'll shorten the DRS, but fine. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. because they could overtake in Spain.
Woo.
Anyway.
Okay, we've got some Discord submissions for Moment of the Race, but as usual, we'll start with our own submissions. What stood out in the Grand Prix for you, Harry?
Look, there's probably one that's going to win a lot of, we know it's won a lot of Discord submissions, but I'll start with a couple of others. Quite early on, I'm just going to list a few here. The Hulkenberg-Zhou Tsunoda battle.
Oh, that was fun, wasn't it?
Pretty spicy.
When we actually got on board with it, yeah.
Yeah. We missed a lot of it, but that was spicy. Gasly's overtake on De Vries, where De Vries tried to overtake and then Gasly went right around him, absolutely mugged him blind.
Nice.
Another moment for me was everyone starting on soft tyres. Why? What are you doing? What?
I appreciate they are, in other races, that would have been the medium or even the hard tyre, but it's odd to see, isn't it?
Yeah, mix it up, guys. Come on. I know the Red Bull started on mediums, and then, as you say, Sargent on hards. Esteban Ocon still trying to kill Fernando Alonso. Doesn't like that. Does not like that man.
That was borderline. Do you think that was just about okay? Or
just okay, but it was... I'm shocked, and maybe we didn't hear it, but I'm shocked there was no message from Alonso after that.
If he said something, we'd have heard it.
We'd have heard it, yeah. So maybe he didn't think it was borderline, but it was... you just saw like all the other overtakes he had. He obviously had the fresher tyres. He was just blasting past people. And then this one, Ocon tries to take him off onto the grass. So yeah, that was a good one. Another Alonso one, but Alonso waving to the crowd on the last couple of corners. But the one that's going to get a lot of votes, so spoiler alert, but George Sweaty Russell. Oh my lord. It was... I thought he was trying to do some clever bluff to get Red Bull.
Might have been.
Maybe he was. But the call for it's raining at turn 5, to which no one else had called. And I even looked on Twitter to see if there was like rain happening and we didn't know about it. Then it turned out he was just a sweaty man working hard in his F1 car. That's comedy gold. And I got to say again, this weekend, George... some more comedy gold from him.
I love George Russell. I love having him in F1. He
great. He said bloody Nora, which is the most UK thing ever. Bloody Nora.
As soon as it started raining in qualifying, who was the first? It's
spitting straight away. Loves to say it's spitting. But yeah, honestly, bloody Nora had me cackling yesterday in quality. That
was solid work. Only solid.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Ugh.
Yes, anyway, there was quite a few there, but the one I've settled on is indeed George Russell, the sweatiest man.
Honorary shout out for George Russell, the sweatiest man ever. Honestly, a top tip, if it's sweat, it's happening inside the helmet.
Inside your helmet.
If it's not sweat, it'll be happening outside the helmet. Oh, that proper got me. George Russell nearly going on intermediate tyres because of his own sweat would have definitely been moment of the race. But instead, I'm going to say something that's already been mentioned is related to Alonso waving. Alonso telling Lance Stroll, don't worry,
don't panic.
I'm not going to overtake you. I'm just opening up a gap. I don't care what he says. That is terrifying if you're anyone in front. Jeez, that proper made me laugh. It also made me a little bit upset because if Alonso isn't bothered about those 2 points, it probably means he thinks there's absolutely no chance that those 2 points are going to matter at the end of the season. Which I appreciate was the long-term play to keep the Strolls happy. But if he really needed those 2 points, he'd have taken them, and he didn't feel he had to. So
I gotta say, it's a new Fernando Alonso. I couldn't quite believe he'd said it. I don't remember a time Fernando Alonso. I know he played the long game with Ocon in Hungary in 2021, but they were, very different positions. It was a shock. It was a shock. I can't imagine a time when he's not if he's able to, why he wouldn't overtake someone. So he's playing a different game there. But you're right. That is, he obviously doesn't maybe think this year's the championship year, but well, it's not the championship year, is it? Come on. But maybe he knows that next race the car's going to be good again, so he doesn't. I don't need those 2 points. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Anyway,
maybe he's just trying to boost Stroll's confidence.
Maybe. I mean, if they want to finish P2, then maybe this is the way to do it.
Maybe so. As you've already alluded to, there's probably going to be a lot of Russell submissions here, but what have the people got to say?
Brace yourselves, folks. And sorry to people that haven't made it on, but there were so many votes for Russell that it got repetitive. So sorry about that. Right, first up, Joys That Kill.
George probably saying, "Oh, is it raining? Oh, it's actually my sweat." I absolutely love you, George. I also am recording this on lap 60, so I'm assuming you have a podium. So I'm screaming on the inside right now.
Strategist Joy knew what was going to happen 6 laps from the end.
Had no faith in Perez there.
None at all.
The next one is from sad Ferrari fan.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Ferrari having bad strategies. Tears, crying, sobbing. What a sad day.
Yeah. Sad day for Ferrari fans out there.
My condolences.
my sincere condolences. Right, next up, Normie Boy. Norm from Texas.
Norm from Texas here. Figured I'd give my moment of the race, and that has to go to the future British milk councilman George Russell, confusing sweat for rain in his visor. Yeah, that actually happened. Anyway, keep breaking late, guys.
Milk councilman?
I think he's saying milk councilman. I don't know. Maybe it's something. Maybe it's. I don't know.
He's hotter on British politics than I am, because I have not come across a milk councilman before.
Have you not heard of the Milk Party? Right, next up is Groovy T, who I believe is a first-time submitter.
This is Tyler from the States, first-time submitter, and my moment of the race was any George Russell radio conversation. The first being basically a lap long of him trying to change his tire strategy. The second claiming it was raining, and then finally him saying, "Oh no, just sweat." Gotta love it.
Yeah, I love George Russell doing the one-stop, or at least trying to do the one-stop.
Just don't pit me, guys. Don't want me pit. Right, next is Woody.
Hey, Woody here from the home of Haas here in North Kakalaka, USA. I wanted to give my moment of the race to anytime Georgie Russ gets on the mic, but we have to address the worst man on the mic today. Good Bradley Lord, get off of my broadcast. He might be a lovely fella over there at Mercedes, but he's more boring than math class and duller than a burnout light bulb. Bring back James Vowles every week. I don't care how bad Williams is.
Brutal.
Wow.
Well,
right.
Yeah, unpopular opinion. I thought he was a breath of fresh air. I actually enjoyed having someone that wasn't a team principal being on there, for being honest. It's quite nice.
Yeah, Toto was like, "I'm not doing it." Go on, Brad.
I'm not doing it, but Toto sat next to him, just trying to distract him.
Feeding him notes.
Yeah. Anyway, right, this one. I'm sorry if I say this wrong, but on Discord, I think it says Jiri Pavlenka. Please
let us know.
Yeah, write in and correct me if I'm wrong there, but apologies.
My moment of the race has to be the end of it, because it means I can go back to what I was doing before the Grand Prix. Nothing happened.
Not a fan of the Spanish GP. Probably wouldn't give it a 6.5.
No, it doesn't sound like it would be quite as highly rated as what we've gone for.
And then finally, we've got All Good Always. I'm not playing yours. That's a bit savage.
The bluff.
Sorry.
If we're not going to play him, you can't say their name, Harry.
All Good Always, I'm very sorry, but yours is what everyone else has said. So anyway, what I was going to say is Dorito Dust.
What's going on, boys? It's your late breaking friend, Dorito Dust, aka Potato Beverage. I'm working in a hospital, so I'm work every weekend, so I missed the race once again, so I'll watch it tonight, but I'll do my moment of the weekend is Fernando Alonso instantly recognizing Gasly's 3-place penalty. If only he could replace the real FIA during the race.
Reach.
Yep, it's a fair call. If you haven't seen the race, that's probably the moment of Saturday. And that's all we've got time for. And this is not a bluff. No beef this week. She's at MotoFest in Coventry. So she
Hope you're having
can't.
fun, Beef.
She can't do a submission. So sorry, no life update. But I'm sure there'll be another one in a couple.
Well, I
of
mean,
weeks'
you've
time.
just kind of given it for her, I guess.
Oh yeah, sorry. Life update for Beef. She's in Coventry.
Great, thank you. Well, we've survived another episode without Sam. I mean, this is the first of 3
One down,
that we have
2
to
to
do
go.
without.
Yeah.
I know. We just one episode in, but we miss you, Sam, and we are very excited to have you back for the Canada preview. But we've got another 2, as you mentioned, between then. So we'll have a couple of non-race weekend episodes. I know I'm just thinking that we've done 3 previews in a row. Obviously, one didn't actually end up happening, but we still did the preview, didn't we? So we'll be back midweek. Before then, though, you can catch us on all of our social channels. So we're at L Breaking on Twitter, we're the Late Breaking F1 podcast on Instagram and on TikTok, because we're down with the kids, apparently.
Proper down.
We've got Patreon. So every single month, if you're on the Patreon, you'll get 2 exclusive episodes, or extras, as I'm sure Sam will be begging me to call them. So there'll be 2 of those for June that we're looking to record a little bit later in the month. So you can catch us there as well. If you'd like some late breaking merchandise, you can get some of those. You can look hunkalicious, I believe is the correct term. Yep. All of these links are in the description, by the way, and you can join our Discord as well. So you can get involved in general chat. You can get involved in submissions that we've had today, and we do that on the preview as well. There are probably a few other things that I haven't plugged that I could do. 5-star reviews. I'll throw that one in there. If I've forgotten anything else, though, I do apologise. And as mentioned, Sam will be back to do these very soon, to the relief of literally everyone.
I think
most of all myself.
It's been good though. That's one of your better ones.
That was smoother. I'm getting there.
Smooth operator.
Smooth outroator.
Oh, we've ruined it. Never mind.
Yeah, sorry. That was all hard work undone. Anyway, we'll see you soon. I've been Ben Hocking.
I've been Harry Eade.
And remember, keep breaking late.
2 in a row, baby.